Welcome into the Wednesday edition of the Football Happy Hour. I'm Jeremy St. Louis. It is Wednesday, so that means we're doing college football picks. And the past 2 days have been all about the coaching moves, but today it's down to the football on the field as we head into championship weekend.
It's the game of the year in college football, and we've got it on CBS. Top-ranked Georgia against defending champion Alabama for the SEC championship and a spot in the college football playoff. It's been an unpredictable season everywhere except in Athens, Georgia. The Bulldogs have been unflappable. After opening the season by shutting down Clemson, it's been one boat race after another. The dog defense, one of the most dominant we've seen in recent college football history. But they haven't faced an offense quite like the Bryce Young-led Crimson Tide.
He's like a point guard. He's like an elite point guard that can distribute the ball. And when he's dribbling down the court, he's got the ability to throw it over there, and then he can make you miss.
For Alabama, it's been about survival. A surprising loss to A&M and several more close calls, and many are thinking there's a definite gap between the top two teams in the SEC. But it's hard to ever bet against the greatest coach of all time.
It'll be a tremendous challenge for our players to play well. We've got to have the right mindset and good preparation all week long to be able to do that.
Motivation isn't short on either side, especially for Georgia. They haven't beaten Alabama since 2007, and they haven't won a national championship since 1980. And it was Bama who kept them from snapping that title drought 4 years ago. The Tide coming back from 13 down at halftime to force overtime and then walk off with the national championship. That following season, very similar circumstances in the SEC championship. Georgia again held a 2-touchdown lead, only to see the Tide rally for the win. Is this the year Georgia finally gets over the hump? Can Saban and Alabama make it 7 straight against the Dogs? Everything on the line Saturday afternoon in Atlanta.
Thank you, Chris Hassel. That is, of course, one of the big Power 5 title games coming up this weekend. Georgia 6.5-point favorites. That line has shifted a little bit. In the ACC, Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, 2-10-2 teams going at it there. Michigan, of course, in the Big Ten title game, taking down Ohio State last weekend. They'll take on Iowa, double-digit favorites there. Oklahoma State, Baylor in the Big 12, and Oregon versus Utah. That game at the top there, the Pac-12 championship. All right, to get us into the picks, let's welcome in our former star college football quarterbacks, Brady Quinn, and Danny Kanell. There we go. They were already getting into it during the piece before we even came on the air, talking about the ACC title game this weekend. You guys are hyped for this weekend.
It's a huge weekend. I mean, in particular, and what we were talking about was really making a case for the Heisman. I think in the ACC championship game, your guy, Kenny Pickett, my guy, Kenny Pickett, he can make a case. I mean, they're going to put up some big numbers between him and Wake Forest, but BY's got a great opportunity now to kind of seal it, in my opinion. I think he did with that drive last week and the overtime win versus Auburn. But now it's his chance this week to really kind of put his foot on the gas and have a true Heisman moment if they can upset Georgia.
You know why we're chomping at the bit to talk these games? Because all we've been talking about is coaches moving around and what's the right way to do, how many minutes do you need to address the team. We're ready to talk some ball.
Yeah, all right, let's talk about Georgia, Alabama. It's the game that we've all been waiting for. I mean, at the beginning of the season, it was the game that was predicted. As mentioned, the line jumped. It was 4.5 to start. Now it's up to 6.5 favoring Georgia. The over-under sitting at 50. It has dropped. It started at 51.5. It's dropped now to 50. So what are your expectations for this game, Brady?
Low-scoring game. I mean, that I think is the best play is the under in this one. And it's not so much about the Georgia defense. We all know about the Georgia defense, probably one of the historically best defenses, at least statistically speaking, that we've seen. Talent on every single level. When you want to talk about Jordan Davis or Trayvon Walker up front, Nakobe Dean, or talk about anyone in their secondary, we know about their talent. What doesn't get talked about enough is Alabama's not too shabby either. They're basically right behind Georgia in the SEC in almost every defensive category. So this actually is going to be a much more of a rock fight, that old school SEC football we're accustomed to seeing than we've seen in the past. So give a lot of credit to the Alabama defense, the way they've come around, led by Will Anderson, who should be a Heisman candidate, by the way. But the other side of this too, Danny, for me, it's about the quarterback play. Because on one side, you've got who probably will win the Heisman this year in Bryce Young. And on the other side, you've got what is basically a game manager in Stetson Bennett. I know he threw really well last week versus Georgia Tech. That was kind of a confidence builder. Different challenge this week versus Alabama. I think if Alabama can stop the rushing attack of Georgia, which they are a good rush defense, and put it on Stetson Bennett's shoulders, and you make this a mano quarterback versus quarterback game, Alabama's got a shot. So I'm going to go ahead and take the 6.5 points, even though I do think Georgia probably wins this one in a low-scoring tight game.
I agree on everything you said. If you look at the teams that played Georgia well, and for a half, like it's all relative. Georgia's had a pretty easy schedule. They've blown out most of their opponents. But I go back all the way to Clemson. I look at Florida was 3-0 with a couple minutes left in the first half, and Auburn was in the game in the first half. All those quarterbacks, it was DJ Uyunglele threw a pick six.
Yep.
Bo Nix made some mistakes, and Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson both made really critical mistakes to kind of lose the game. Then they were down 2 touchdowns, and you have to start throwing, and then game over.
Right.
Bryce Young's not going to make those mistakes. So that, to me, that's where I think is the X factor. It's Bryce Young and it's Alabama's defense. If Alabama's defense can make this ugly and keep it a one-possession game in the second half, it'll be really the first time all year since Clemson that Georgia's been in that situation. Then all of a sudden you have to think about the Alabama factor and how much they've owned this rivalry and this game for the past 7 or 8 years. And then it starts becoming a mental aspect, and Georgia starts getting a little bit tighter, and Bama starts getting more confidence because they've won this game in the second half almost every time they've faced. So Bryce Young, to me, the X factor, the defense, the factor. And if that's the case, give me Bryce Young, give me Alabama in those points, 6.5. I think this is a tight game. I think it's a low-scoring game. I love the under. I'm like you, Brady. I think it'll be low-scoring. I think Georgia wins, though. I do think they get over that hump, but I think it'll be a classic.
I think the biggest mismatch is going to be that defensive front for Georgia versus the Alabama offensive line. I mean, it doesn't matter who Alabama's played this year. Bryce Young has had to make up for it, particularly the interior of the offensive line, how poorly they've played, how bad they've been schemed up. That's more of my concern, I think, for Bryce Young. And I don't expect Bama to be able to run the football at all in this one. And that's a tough place to be in as a quarterback. We already saw him struggle last week not having his number 1 wide receiver in Jamison Williams. The only saving grace is he gets him back for this one, and that's a legitimate threat to the Georgia secondary because not many people can run with Jamison Williams. But will Bryce Young have time to get the ball to him and John Mechie? That's going to be the biggest key, and that's where I think the difference is for this game is that Georgia defensive front having its way with the Alabama offensive line.
Georgia shut out 3 of their top 5 or Power 5 opponents this season. So, yeah, this defense is going to be a tough one for Bama. Okay, let's talk about the Big Ten. We thought it would be Ohio State and somebody.
Well, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
They were moving that direction, yeah.
Turns out it's going to be Michigan and Iowa. The Wolverines making their first appearance in the championship game. Iowa making their second. Wolverines giving double-digit points here. Danny, when you look at this particular game, not the game we expected, but it sets up as a pretty good game.
I'm excited about what the potential of what this Michigan team could do, but I'm also worried. Like, have they cleared the field yet from the celebration? Because they were out there a long time.
Hangover?
Yeah, absolutely. Hangover. Hangover impacted this game. They're feeling great about themselves. They get over this massive hurdle that is Ohio State. Jim Harbaugh can't help himself and gives the born on third base quote. Like, they're feeling themselves pretty good. There is zero question they have way more talent than Iowa does. Iowa's got a really good defense, but I don't even think Kirk Ferentz knows who his quarterback is. There's been a revolving door at quarterback the last couple weeks. Last week it was Spencer Petras back to the rescue in a game that really they should have lost against Nebraska, but Nebraska cannot find a way to win a game. But I think this game starts out slow. I think Michigan does have to kind of shake off some of those cobwebs, kind of realize, okay, what's at stake? Michigan's going to win this game, but I do think in a typical Big Ten ugly start, their defense, I think, takes over. I do think Iowa's defense has some success. That's why I like the under, but I like Iowa in the points. I think Michigan wins by either a touchdown or 10. As long as it's over 10 and it's 10.5, I like the Iowa Hawkeyes. They're here as the dog, and I like the under, even though it's 43.5.
You know, I was going into this thinking I'd like the under. I actually think it's just going to go just over this. I think we'll see a little bit more scoring than we're accustomed to, in particular for Iowa, who likes to slow down the game, not put up a ton of points. But this line is an overreaction to what we saw last week with Michigan versus Ohio State. And so I think 10.5, I hate the hook on a double-digit spread like that. But more so than that, Iowa they play pretty much everyone close. I mean, they're a sound, fundamental team. They don't beat themselves. They don't commit a ton of penalties. They're good at getting turnovers. They got more interceptions gained than any team in the country, 22, I believe. So Cade McNamara, there's going to be a lot of pressure put on him to not turn the football over, because typically Iowa does a good job of playing keep away, running the football with Tyler Goodson, eating up the clock, and if they don't, find a way of getting points, they'll flip the field on you. Like, that's the X factor to this game, I think, is the special teams for Iowa. Charlie Jones has been electric. He's second or third in the Big Ten as far as punt returns. Kickoff returns, took one back 2 weeks ago. That's going to be an advantage for them. And I also think their punter, Torrey Taylor. We never talked about this kind of stuff.
Against Penn State, right?
It was unbelievable. Yeah. He kicked like 5 or 6 inside the 10. I've never seen anything like it before. So they feel comfortable playing that style of game. Like, Iowa wants this to be a low-scoring, slow it down, limit the possessions from Michigan, and let's get to the fourth quarter where we have to make a play or two, and that's where we want to live. So for that reason, this line's way too big for this style of football game. I'm on the side of Iowa here. I do think Michigan wins this. To your point, they're more explosive on the outside of wide receiver. I love what Josh Gaddis has done, finding different ways of getting to edges, whether it was heading last week on the reverse for a touchdown, or just even some of the quick screens to the outside, or spreading out defenses using Blake Corum in the passing game at the running back spot to find mismatches, or Eric All. I do love all of that. I just think, there's not so much a hangover effect for me. It's just a big spread for this. But Michigan gets the win. They move on to the college football playoff. Congrats to Jim Harbaugh, the Wolverines, this whole team, Aiden Hutchinson, who's a stud, for everything they've been able to kind of overcome this season. But at the end of the day, I still think there's a few points scored to this one, but I'm on the side of Iowa.
Took some time for Harbaugh. Michigan looking for its 43rd Big Ten championship, first since 2004 when they shared it with Iowa. Iowa's last lone championship was back in 1985, as we saw on the board. Oklahoma State looking to get back into the top 4 for the playoff as they take on Baylor in the Big 12 title game. The Cowboys favored by 5.5, the over-under sitting at 46.5. Who do you like in this one, Brady?
I like Oklahoma State. Look, this has been one of the hotter teams in the country, and I think my biggest concern is whether or not Gary Bohannon plays for Baylor. He went out, he dressed before pregame, warmed up some, but still looked like from the video we at least saw, he was walking a little gingerly. So if he doesn't play in this game, I really like Oklahoma State. And that's no disrespect for Blake Shapen the way he played last week. Didn't turn the football over, threw a couple touchdown passes, but this is a huge challenge going up against Oklahoma State. And when these two teams played earlier this season, it was a very lopsided affair in the exact way you would think Oklahoma State wants to play it. They rushed for 230 yards. They held Baylor to 285 yards of total offense. And guess what? The best team at getting off the field on third down held Baylor to 3 of 15 conversions in that game. That's probably what you're going to see here. So if Gary Bohannon doesn't play in this one, I really love the 5.5. I think it could get out of hand, to be quite honest with you. If he does, maybe it's a little bit closer, tighter affair, but this is going to be another low-scoring game when you think about both these defenses and the scheme that Dave Aranda comes up with.
So I think this is one you might want to wait, actually, to see, right before the game, see what Gary Bohannon's status is. I'm assuming he's going to play. Seeing he dressed out last week, it was close enough to a game-time decision. That, to me, another week of rest. They're going to take it easy on him. He's got to go. This is one where you just play and you figure it out. I'm with you on the under. If Gary Bohannon plays, I'm going to take Baylor. I think it's hard to beat a team twice. I do believe in that. It's very similar to Michigan and the hump they got over in beating Ohio State. This Oklahoma State team, to beat Oklahoma and then not have to play them in a Big 12 championship game, because they've beaten them before, but then haven't been able to win the Big 12 championship, that's a massive hurdle. And if you go back, the reason I like the under, if you look before the Oklahoma game, Oklahoma State's defense was as dominant as it gets. Through the month of November, they were holding teams to, under a touchdown. They were as dominant as it gets. I do think this will be a defensive kind of tight game, and the Big 12 is a little bit wacky. I can see this being a field goal game. So I'll take Baylor in those points, but I'm total agreement. I think it's going to be under the 46.5.
One of the things since that game, if you go back, Spencer Sanders threw 3 interceptions in that game. He's thrown 4 in the last 7 games. He's cleaned up his play. He's been utilizing his legs a lot more, and I think you've seen the evolution of Tate Martin and Brendan Presley in the passing game for Oklahoma State. We don't look at them as a passing team, but they've started to come along making some big plays. So that, to me, is another element of this where if they need to go to throwing the football, Sanders has done a much better job through the air, and those wide receivers are making plays for him as well. So keep an eye on that.
You mentioned the blowout earlier in the season. That was the first loss for Baylor this season and helped Oklahoma State improve to 5-0. That was back in the first week of October. Wake Forest will appear in the ACC Championship for the first time since 2006, a game they won 9-6 over Georgia Tech. Pitt will be playing in their first ACC title game since 2018 and just their second all-time. Close call here, just a 3-point difference. So what's your lean here, Danny? I know you're excited about this game. This is the one we were talking about.
Yeah. Jeremy, this should be called the get some respect game for the ACC. These teams aren't getting enough love, including our guy
Brady's
Kenny
reaction.
Pickett. I know, because he doesn't listen to me. These teams have
I've been talking
buried.
about Kenny Pickett all year.
I know you have.
That in here.
But don't forget about Sam Hartman. These teams have been buried on the ACC network. Like, no one's watching them all season long. Kenny Pickett should be a firm number 2 in the Heisman, but he's not, and I think it's because he plays in the ACC and he's playing at Pitt. But what both of these teams done is phenomenal. Wake Forest gets a big win that Dave Clawson is not going to go to Virginia Tech. He's not going anywhere. They retain him. And Pitt gets the big win because of this guy. Kenny Pickett has been sensational all season long. It's their first 10-win regular season in 40 years. He's breaking almost every record at the same place where Dan Marino played. It's been a fantastic season. I think the Cinderella story, it feels like a team of destiny that has found ways to win. So I'm going to go with Pitt, lay the points. I'm shocked, Brady, that you don't have the over. You need to come on over to the ACC side and watch some. Wake Forest has had multiple games that are like in the 60s and 70s that they had to put up against Army. I think this is an absolute shootout. I think both quarterbacks will be on display because Sam Hartman's no slouch either. And watch out if Bryce Young slips up, which I don't know how he plays against Georgia. This is the last game of the day, the last thing Heisman voters will see. If this game is a field goal game and it's a shootout, it could be Kenny Pickett's opportunity maybe to steal the Heisman Trophy.
In regards to the Heisman, I think one of my concerns with Kenny being able to make a case is how many ballots are still out there. We've seen in the past too many voters put it in before conference championship weekend, and that bothers me. I don't have a vote, so I'm just saying that's the reality of that. In regards to this game, here's why I like the under, and I do think it's going to be close. The reality is all we've talked about in regards to this matchup is Kenny Pickett, Biletnikoff finalist Jordan Addison, this passing attack for Pitt, the passing attack with Roberson and Perry from Hartman. That's all we hear about. You don't think both defenses are chomping at the bit a little bit, being like, hey, wait on a second. Like, they're going to end up being the reason why Pitt wins this football game and wins the ACC championship, in my opinion. And the reason is because that defensive front, they're the best at getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks in the ACC. They lead in sacks. I think Pat Narduzzi is going to come up with a scheme to be able to get after Sam Hartman. And in particular, if you look at what Brent Venables did against them at Clemson, it's the slow RPO where they have the running back almost walk through that mesh. That works when you don't have a defensive front that can penetrate. Pitt can do that. They will get after Sam Hartman. That's why I like the under. I don't see quite as much scoring in this one. I do think when Pitt gets up, they might start to run the football a little bit different, go ahead and hang their hat on that ACC championship. But I'm laying the 3 points. Just hitting that under should be a fun, entertaining game.
Highest over-under of the Power 5 championship games at 72.5. The two teams averaging 85 points combined per game. So there are points there, but Brady says go with the under there. Pitt looking to win its third conference championship in program history and first conference championship as a member of the ACC. Okay, last among the title games, number 10, Oregon taking on number 17, Utah in the Pac-12. The Ducks making their 5th title game appearance, a conference record, 3-point dogs, but teams from the North have owned the title game with a 9-1 record. Is that enough for you to buy in, Brady?
I mean, it is if there weren't so many things on the peripheral of what's going on to Oregon right now. You know, Joe Moorhead, their offensive coordinator, he's slated to be the next head coach at Akron. I wonder if that impacts his, preparation for all this as he tries to put together a staff, maybe even start recruiting and all that, and they're worried about this conference championship game. There's rumors that Mario Cristobal could be heading to South Florida, maybe to the University of Miami. They're about ready to look at hiring an athletic director, so that's going to move relatively quickly. So I wonder that, and I know it's hard to beat a team twice, but Utah absolutely dominated Oregon. I mean, it wasn't even close. I got to be honest, this might just be a bad matchup for Oregon. With the way they run the football with Tavion Thomas, the added element of being able to throw down the field, Britton Covey and the variety of ways they get him the football in his, 15th year playing college football at this point in the return game at wide receiver. I mean, Cameron Rising has really brought a different element that I don't know that Utah has had as much of the ability to throw down the field like he can. So I just think it's a bad matchup. I'm going to go ahead and lay the 3 points here. I do think this is going to be a lower scoring game. I think the defenses will step up. There's a lot of familiarity, obviously, playing each other again. But this is just one of those games where I wanted to go with Oregon, but there's a lot of reasons why I feel like you can not make the case for that. Like, they're not playing for what they were earlier, when if they beat Utah, They're in the college football playoff. We're having that conversation right now. Now that's not even the case.
You know what might be the biggest sign that Mario might leave is the fact that Joe Moorhead left for Akron. Like, that's not it's a little bit of a shocker.
Easy now.
Yeah,
hold on. Home of one LeBron James.
Okay.
Okay, don't be talking about Akron, Ohio.
Says the kid, just a kid from Akron over here.
Yeah, just saying.
So that was like a sign for me. But I look at this, nothing would be more Pac-12 than for Oregon, who had the biggest win of the season against Ohio State, was primed right in position to make the playoff. Then they lose to Stanford, but they're like, okay, they can still make the playoff. Then they get blown out against Utah. Nothing more would be Pac-12 than for Oregon to come back, win the Pac-12 title, and look like, man, they could just what could have been. Like, it's so many times you see this happen. I like the Ducks here. That was an embarrassing performance. It was in Salt Lake. There was altitude to deal with. This one will be neutral. This will change the dynamic a little bit. I've got to believe that Kayvon Thibodeau in his last game as a Duck will have that defense playing better. I didn't have a play on the total, but I would agree with you. I would take the under. Lloyd and Tafua for Utah are some of the best in the country at what they do. Like, neither quarterback really concerns you. I do think Utah has the edge. But I've got to feel there's some pride in Oregon. Maybe in us against the world. Hey, who knows if our coach is going, but it's us against them. I just feel like Oregon has the edge of those Pac-12 titles, 4-0 in the game. I'm going to give it to Oregon.
Well, USC has the South's only win in the championship game, and that came back in 2017. Let's take a look at Oregon's record in the Pac-12 championship game. 2 wins. Speaking of USC, guess what? They're also playing this weekend.
Yeah.
But they're not playing in a title game. They have a makeup game versus Cal on the docket. Lincoln Riley getting his first look at his team in a competitive environment. Cal favored by 4 points. The over-under sitting at 58. Some kids are going to want to impress the new coach. What are you thinking here, Danny?
So I agree with you, Jeremy. I mean, a bunch of times. I never had to deal with it in college. I don't think you did either. But in the NFL, you did.
But during the season.
But I was on some bad teams in the NFL, and a coach would come in and be like, hey, the season's gone, but you need to be playing for your job. And that's where the USC players are facing with, because if you follow the transfer portal, if you follow recruiting with the amount of players that are decommitting from Oklahoma and kind of reopening their decision and maybe thinking about going to USC, you need to impress. So I do think there is a wake-up call of sorts at USC. Now, how much of a difference does it make? I do think Everett does make a huge difference, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which is why I'm going to attack the total as well and take the under. Justin Wilcox, one of the better defensive minds in the game. I think they'll have a game plan. I don't think you'll see fireworks. And again, the number's a little bit too heavy for me at 4. I think this will be close, but if I can get that with USC, who I do think is more talented than a Cal team, I'm going to take the Trojans.
I mean, this is going to be an awful atmosphere, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Berkeley traditionally is, but even this matchup, 2 4-7 football teams, they're not really playing for much outside of USC, playing for Lincoln Riley, who I do suspect will probably be there on the sidelines, be in the stands, press box, something, taking this all in along with the other staff members that he brought along with him. So I expect Jackson Dart to make enough plays in this game to be able to not only cover this, but outright win. So go ahead and bet USC on the money line here. But the under is the play. I mean, the only thing you can feel confident in is that defense you talked about from Cal holding down USC to a degree, and then the Cal offense is struggling to score because that's kind of what they do. So the bottom line is under is the best play on this one, but I do think USC will feel motivated. I feel like they feel a little rejuvenated with Lincoln Riley and this new staff and, you know, Mike Bone pumping up the whole program and everything else there in Southern Cal. I know they've got a lot to look forward to in the future, but as of right now, maybe this is what gives them a little momentum going into the offseason.
That game's Saturday at 11 Eastern time over on FS1. Those are the Power 5 picks and USC Cal from Danny and Brady. More picks to come as this edition of the Football Happy Hour continues. Let's recap their picks for those Power 5 games and our one other. Both of them like Bama and the under in that SEC title game. Iowa and over, says Brady. Iowa and under, says Danny. The differ on Baylor, Oklahoma State. A little bit of unity in terms of taking Pitt, and difference between Oregon and Utah. Brady says take Utah in the under. Danny says go with Oregon, and they're both taking USC and the under in that makeup game versus Cal. Georgia and Alabama have some defenses to fear, but both Cincinnati and Houston are in the top 20. They'll face each other in the AAC championship, with the Bearcats looking to consolidate their playoff spot. Danny, Brady, and Brandon will discuss that game on the other side.
So the Power 5, they're not the only ones getting busy this weekend. Others will get to work, of course. Starting Friday night, you got Western Kentucky and UT San Antonio in Conference USA. And Saturday, the MAC, Mountain West, Sun Belt, and then the big one down there And the American Houston taking on number 4 Cincinnati there Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The Bearcats have a lot riding on this one, not just in the conference, but also in that CFP. Let's bring Brady and Danny back in here to talk about the rest of the championship weekend. Of course, the Power Five's not the only ones getting all in the conversation, but let's look in the American. The Bearcats, as I mentioned, they got a lot riding on this one. The Cougars have a chance to maybe upset and send them out of that CFP. How do you see this one going?
I mean, they're two evenly matched teams. I don't know how you see this, but I think when you look at, Desmond Ridder and Clayton Tune and both defense for Houston, Cincinnati, and then some of the other pieces they have out around them, they're evenly matched teams. I was actually shocked to see this line at 10.5 points. I thought it'd be closer, like 7.5, something like that. So clearly that tells you I'm going to take the 10.5 points in Houston on this side of it. But I will say this, Cincinnati's going to win. They're on a mission. Luke Fickell understands the importance of this game for Cincinnati, for every group of 5 team that's out there. So they have an opportunity to play in the college football playoff and potentially for a national championship. It's been a long time coming for Desmond Ridder, potentially a Heisman moment. I don't know where he stands as far as balloting goes, but he's the quarterback of an undefeated team. He's the conference, offensive player of the year. There's a lot of good things he's done statistically. It's not going to stand up to Bryce Young or Kenny Pickett, but he's as important to his team as any quarterback on any team in college football. So, look, Cincinnati gets the win, but I do think this is going to be a tighter game than what that spread shows. And by the way, a lot of points. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm with you. 2 great quarterbacks. Clayton Tune has been phenomenal for Houston, and I don't know if Houston's been getting enough national attention. I get they play in the American, but they lost week 1 to Texas Tech, which is a bad loss. They've won 11 games since then, and a lot of them very impressive fashion. Like, they might have more style points than Cincinnati, but they don't have the 0 in the loss column. Cincinnati's the better program, but I'm with you. I thought this number was set too high. Give me Houston and those points. If you say, well, it's at Nippert, it's in Cincinnati because it is a home game for them. They didn't play great in front of the home crowd when, game day was there and they were playing against, who was that, Tulsa, and they almost lost on the last possession. This is a team that I think just wants to get through this. I think they realize we don't need style points. I think they do because Oklahoma State is lurking, but I think they feel like they control their own destiny. Let's just win. So I do think Cincinnati wins the game, but I think it's closer to a touchdown or 7 points. That 10 and a hook to me is just, that's what gets it. If it was below that, I might think about taking Cincinnati. The other thing I like about this game, Luke Fickell is the one coach who's been named just as much as anybody in the country for head coaching jobs, and he's handled it better than any of them. And most importantly, he's coaching his game now for the championship. He didn't leave, but all the time he's always put the attention back. And I think it's because it's a reflection of him being a former player that played at a high level that's been around this program.
I think he understands the importance, too, of this moment. I mean, like I said, this is the first we've ever seen this since the college football playoff started. A legitimate shot at playing for a national championship, at least being in the semifinal game for that matter. And so I think he understands the importance for the players in that locker room. It's historic for all the group of 5 teams. I mean, maybe this actually spurs some of the conversation of, hey, let's get to expansion. That vote's rapidly approaching us now, whether or not we're going to expand to 8, 12 teams, whatever it is. And so this might be the last opportunity to try to push that narrative too, that, hey, there's a lot of group of 5 teams out there, other teams out there who are deserving of playing for a national championship and a bigger playoff.
By the way, both programs ranked in the top 20 in terms of allowing the fewest points. Cincinnati 3rd and Houston 19. In the Mountain West, Utah State, San Diego State. Danny, how do you see this one panning out?
So this game to me is going to be pretty entertaining, except it's going to be very unusual because typically we talk about the quarterback matchups in this one. You're not. Probably the 2 biggest stars in this game are Devin Tompkins, wide receiver for Utah State, and Matt Ariza, the punter for San Diego State. So that tells me if the punter is going to be one of the best players in the field, give me that under all day long.
Don't sleep on Greg Bell like that. Don't sleep on Greg Bell.
All right, so again, no quarterback. That is the running back, and that is their commitment to the run. I think this game is incredibly low scoring. I love the under. I do love San Diego State because I feel like they have an identity. Utah State has played multiple quarterbacks. Their quarterback play has been erratic. San Diego State runs the football with Greg Bell, and they play outstanding defense. They play field position with Ariza as their superhero special teamer. So I'll take San Diego State. I'll take the Aztecs. I'll lay the points, and I'll also take the under because I don't trust Utah State. It's been a very volatile season, up and down for them. I trust San Diego State with only 1 blemish.
Yeah, I was going to say, really, when I look at the quarterback situation for San Diego State, Jordan Brookshire, who started the season, then got hurt. You had Lucas Johnson then take over. He ended up kind of stealing the job away from him. But then last week got benched. Brookshire comes back in, kind of saves the day a little bit there too. So it'll be interesting to see who they put out there at quarterback for San Diego State. The play here is the under. It always is when you got a Brady coach defense with the way San Diego State has played this year. I will say this. I do think Logan Bonner can put up some points. You talked about Tompkins. This passing game could get going a little bit. We saw this earlier versus Nevada, where like Carson Strong was able to take some of those shots versus the San Diego State defense. So as good as that defense is, they do find themselves vulnerable. I think the start of the game will largely dictate how the rest of the game is going to go based on if Greg Bell is able to get off to a good start running the football and if San Diego State can limit some of those big plays. But that's my bet on this one. So I'm laying the 6 points. I like the under. I think that's more of the play. But the San Diego State team is one of the better group of 5 teams. It's not getting enough attention.
By the way, last time you said a punter would be a key player. Have you ever said that before?
We were talking about earlier.
Talking about Torrey Taylor.
Yeah, so that's
I was like, that's the X factor, the Big Ten championship.
We're giving the punters a lot of love. We pay attention to the third phase.
Kickers are people too. I understand it. All right, let's look at this.
No, not just punters.
Oh, punters.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
App State, of course, at number 24, Louisiana. These two have some history here, Brady. Third time they met in a title game. How can this shake out?
Well, the interesting thing about this is, and we were talking before the show started, Billy Napier is now named as the head coach at Florida. And so he's kind of sharing duties right now. He's coaching for a conference championship game. He's still trying to recruit, put together a staff, prepare for that move to Florida. It's almost like there's another coach out there who took a head coaching job somewhere else in the SEC. Could have been doing the same thing, maybe waited to take that job down in Baton Rouge and still stayed with his team to at least see if they're going to play for a national championship. But I digress. I'll get back to this one. No, I mean, the bottom line is Louisiana, App State, very even when I think you look at how these defenses match up against one another. The difference to me is Levi Lewis. I just think he overall implements more of the ability as a dual threat quarterback. They've been more balanced this year, too, with their offensive attack, running the football, too. But at the end of the day, I don't know that I trust Chase Bryce. We saw this matchup earlier. He really struggled, turned the football over twice in that one. I think App State, I'm not sure why they're favoring this one. This was another kind of fishy line to me. I'll take the 3 points. I think the other play here is the under because of how good both teams are defensively.
Home dog. Give me the home dog for a conference championship. You mentioned Chase Bryce. He was a turnover machine earlier in the year, and then he got the win against Coastal Carolina. All of a sudden turned into like Aaron Rodgers. Looked awesome, but it's been way too up and down. Levi Lewis with his legs, the combination of that, the deep ball, he's seen a pretty good shot right here. I trust this Louisiana team. I also think there is some value in a team, and I think if Notre Dame gets in, I wouldn't be surprised to see this either. Coaches mean a lot, but the players are the ones on the field, and if they can kind of rally around each other and say, hey, this is us against the world, this is our team, our moment to shine, you get that buy-in, which I do think you'll get from this Louisiana team. I think that could be pretty powerful, so I'll take that.
Fighting Emory Hunts there in Louisiana.
Yeah, man, we're rooting for him.
So, of course, he'll love to see that. In Conference USA, Western Kentucky taking on UT San Antonio. This is a rematch from earlier in the year.
Yep.
Roadrunners, they won that 52-46. It was a shootout. Will it be like that this weekend?
Yes, it will be. But I think this time Western Kentucky gets the better of UTSA. Bailey Zappi has been the most prolific passer in college football this year. That's their MO. That's what they do. And I think that's what you're always going to see with this sort of matchup where you've got Sincere McCormick on one side. The quarterback's going to add to that as well, Frank Harris. But the reality is I think if Western Kentucky gets off to a fast start, and they will in this one, I do think it's going to be hard for UTSA to all of a sudden open things up and really be able to make a big plays in the pass game down the field. That's just not really what they feel comfortable doing. So bottom line is I like Western Kentucky in this one. It's only 2 points. And so obviously they can still win this thing tight and come away with covering this spread. But I also took the under. I think it'll be a little bit more lower scoring.
It's a massive
based
number.
on that 72.5 number.
It's a massive number. I'm with you on the under. I do think it'll be a higher scoring game. That's just too big for me. Bailey Zappi has 50 touchdowns on the season. Like, I didn't think anybody would come close to touching Joe Burrow when he threw 60 a couple years ago. With this game and, a bowl game, I think Bailey Zappi might actually get it. It's pretty phenomenal. The offense they have, they don't even care about running the football. And this, to me, also comes, if you watch UTSA, the way they came into this game, lost last week, avoided disaster the week before. They've kind of been limping to the finish. Western Kentucky's been gaining a little bit more confidence. So I'll go ahead and take the Hilltoppers here as well and lay the points.
All right, last one for us. Let's look at the Mac-Kent State laying 3 here, taking on Northern Illinois. The over-under 74.5. How will this one kind of shake up for you, DK?
Give me Rocky Lombardi and Northern Illinois in this spot. Give me Rocky Lombardi. He's been a little bit up and down, but I do like this Northern Illinois team combined with their run game. I do think this will be a defensive type game, another big number that is massive. But I'm going to take the under. I think in a big stage performance like this, I do think you'll have. This isn't Wake Pitt. Come on, Brady. That's the only one we're going to see actually live up to the matchup. I think this game will go under the 74.5. That number is just too big for me. It's almost one of those principal plays we do on the Cover 3 Locks pod. And a big game, conference championship, I think Northern Illinois rises to the top.
You know, I'm on the other side of this. So I'm going to lay the 3 points here. I actually think Kent State's offense is going to be too much. Dustin Crum, obviously, in the passing game, but also running the football. Marquez Cooper, Xavier Williams. Those guys have really kind of carried the load. Look, they've won 4 of the last 5. They've kind of got on a hot streak here. I do agree with you. That over-under is set so high. I don't see Northern Illinois and your boy Rocky Lombardi putting up quite as many points. So I think the under is the play here, but I'm laying the 3 points in Kent State.
All right, taking the Flashers there, who actually won their back-to-back games to get to this point. Northern Illinois, of course, backed their way in, going 2-2 in their final 4 games. Let's kind of recap those picks to see how it kind of shook out here. Those non-Power 5 championship picks, of course. We're all in agreement when it comes to Houston, the over, San Diego State, the under, Western Kentucky, the under. But then we kind of split a few hairs there with Louisiana, the under for Brady, the over for DK there. And then Kent, the under for Brady, and then also Northern Illinois there, the under. But let's talk about some lock units.
There we go.
We got 5 today. I thought we started with 4, but I think somebody changed a little something. But we got 5 here.
I got 5 on.
There you go.
I switched. I
okay. I didn't say anything.
I was moving back and
I didn't say anything.
I switched earlier to Western Kentucky.
All right. So, of course, we just saw the 3 there. You guys agreed on that. You add the other 2 in the Power 5. So
there we go. Bring the confetti. Let it rain.
That happens. We celebrate here.
I was just going to say, man.
I think our Lock Unity picks have been pretty solid.
Is this our last one of the year? Is this the last one we get to do together?
I don't know. I'm sure they're going to have us work. Yeah, we're going to do
bowl
bowl
games.
games. We'll probably do a bowl marathon.
Okay.
I would say a speech, but I guess we don't have time for that because we'll save that for after all that stuff. All right, guys? All right.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.